George Nansinyama, our distinguished guest of honor, Professor Kaleebu, academicians, students, and ordinary men and women like myself. Good afternoon once again. So today, mine is a simple task. It's just to carry us to an important program, which is the launch of a book that's going to be announced. Usually for this kind of role, it used to be a very daunting task, because then you needed to know about the book, about the authors or author. You need to know something about everybody in the room, and all of this had to be memorized. But now, with the advent of AI, I simply typed into my phone and said, if you are the MC at a book launch titled this at Uganda Mothers University campus in Lubaga, one, how would you dress? Boom, bow tie, suspenders, cut your hair off, just make sure you have brown shoes. Then what would be your opening line? AI gave me an incredible array of choices to pick from. So I looked at 10 alternatives, and I have chosen to go with the following. That our program will be act, and we will start with the formalities of church and state. I don't want to ask AI to guide me on the order on which comes first, whether church or state. I've decided to go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with the church and then state. So I'm looking around the room on who would lead us into a very brief word of prayer. I thought I could do it myself as one that aspired to join the seminary. Then I realized there are those who actually went there but did not come out as priests. Then there are those who went there and came out as priests. Then I can see a distinguished nun in the audience. And so in that spirit, so that I do not annoy those who don't believe in the case of chauvinism. Sister, please, I request humbly that you come and lead us into a word of prayer to usher this event in motion.
May we rise for prayer? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Almighty dear Lord, we want to thank you in a special way for this afternoon. We thank you for your graces. We thank you for keeping us safe from morning up to this time. We thank you for always providing whatever we need. We thank you, dear Lord, for whatever we ask in your name, you provide. And in a special way, we want to thank you for your child in front of you, for his project, and asking you to bless it. As he launches it today, bless his hands, bless all those people who have helped him to come through until the last day. Bless the congregation here present, those listening to him, and let whatever he tells us be of great value today, tomorrow, and in future. We ask all this through Christ our Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it now and ever shall be, world without end. And our dear Mother Mary, we can't forget to implore your help. When your son was invited to come, you are able to supervise everything and to make sure all is there at a time. We kindly implore you that this moment come and be with him. Let him do whatever your Son, the Holy Spirit, tells him to do. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you very much, sister. Let's remain upstanding for the functions of the state. Professor Chamanua, while I was doing my research, I was informed that you are the man most gifted with the best voice, considering that we have a litany of anthems to sing. The East African one, the Ugandan one, the Buganda one, then the university anthem. One stanza each. Thank you very much.
I will accept the challenge. Mungu twaomba tuilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi na amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu zote tuilinde, tuhajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. O Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United, free, for liberty, together we'll always stand. Inspired by those by whose name we are called, the martyrs of Uganda, the source of our strength, our courage and our hope. Guide us, invite you to lead the world. Virtute et sapientia. May we remain faithful to the name. Uganda Matters University, a place of love where it is good to be. Guide us in wisdom to lead the world. Virtute et sapientia.
I think you will agree with me that the man that took the challenge to lead us into this session is actually up to the top notch that there can be. We may now take our seats, distinguished guests. And for those that found that ritual a little too long, I can tell you that let's be glad, because the last time I was officiating at an event like this, the time of starting was 2 o'clock. The guest of honor was a politician. As is always the case, we had a 2 hours delay until the arrival of the guest of honor. But because we are people that love to keep time, we chose to begin on time, go on with the program, and then the guest of honor would find us along the way. So we went through the usual ritual of long prayers and lengthy anthems.
But mark you, when the guest of honor arrives, the program starts afresh, at least for the standard, which is the prayer and the anthems. So what was a long ritual had to be repeated. Gladly for today, our guest of honor is everything but a politician. So rest assured, we won't repeat this to start the program again, but we shall do the same to close it. So brace yourself for that part, and please don't leave. Ladies and gentlemen, you won't believe it. I just thought about it, and it just hit me that it's in fact 5 years since this phenomenon called COVID-19 came to bear. 5 years. You want for a moment to close your eyes and reflect and recall where you were 5 years ago. I, for one, I just realized that my smallest child is 5 years old. And that brings quite a bit of memory at a personal level, because when the lockdown came, they could only allow very distinguished men, I think, who hold certain huge titles, and pregnant women. I was neither of those, but my wife was, and so I got to move because I was acting like an ambulance driver, even when I was just running a domestic errand, because I was pointed at a pregnant lady next to me that I was driving. And very many other experiences that all of you can share. Some, in fact, almost near death. Many of great adversity, loss to loved ones, loss of livelihood, loss of income, and many other losses or near misses. But today, we gather to launch a book that contains literature empirically gathered by very distinguished scholars, speaking to the broader subject of Africa's, I want to use the word reaction to this pandemic in comparison of being looked at from the perspective of the rest of the world. And as is normally the case when you mention Africa against the rest of the world, we normally take or prefer to take a safe corner of, Africa where we decolonized, the ones that are downtrodden and the ones that need hands up to be lifted to get to the fore. That has its own conversations, whether it is the right disposition to take or not. And that's the reason why great minds like yours have gathered here to have this book launched in the manner in which we shall launch it, because we'll have it discussed. The chief discussant will take questions from us, will take our commentary, and the authors will take notes to enrich their next edition. After all, I'm told what we are launching today is volume 2, and there is 8 other volumes to go. They won't rest until there are 10 volumes. The assurance is that they get smaller in pagination. So if volume 1 was 200 pages, volume 10 will just be a mere pamphlet, but will cover the whole subject matter in between. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me start the program in earnest by inviting a more distinguished person than myself to make opening remarks. Welcome us here. This is none other than the Director of Graduate Studies, Research and Enterprise at Uganda Matters University, who is none other than Dr. Robina Akazu. Most welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaseate. Following his words, I wonder how many of us here are ready to get into another experience of 2020 should the government announce that there is lockdown tomorrow. By show of hands. Okay, I only saw one. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, our distinguished guests, you're all welcome to Uganda Matters University. Good afternoon to you. My name is Nakabo Robina, the current Director of Graduate Studies, Research and Enterprise. I thank you all for sparing time to come and join us as we celebrate our research. As our mandate, the university is supposed to teach, and we are supposed to engage in research, and we are also supposed to engage the community. This is part of engaging the community, but also the teaching and research and the engagement of community is supposed to yield knowledge to be generated and therefore shared with the community. And I think that is why we are here. The contributors did what they did. We are now here to share the results. The reasons as to why we are here, the topic is about the COVID-19, probably the reflections. As one of the thinkers so many years ago, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel said, "The owl or Minerva flies always at dusk." So much happened in 2020 and the years that followed. Now, researchers reflected on what happened. They want to share with you what the results were, or probably to help you prepare just in case another one is announced, because I'm sure no one is ready should we be told that we are going into another. And that is the beauty of reflections in research. We get to look at what happened long after it has passed, so that we prepare better if the same circumstances present themselves. Yeah. I welcome you once again, and I would also like to invite the director of Rubaga, because we are at his home, to say something to you and also welcome you in his way. Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you, Dr. Nakabo. The Vice Chancellor, Uganda Matters University, our chief guest, Professor Pontiano Kaleebu, distinguished guests, visitors here, our dear students, members of staff of Uganda Matters University who have managed to join us. I'm so delighted to have this occasion hosted here at Rubaga University, campus. It is not every day that we do gather to appreciate scholarship. And this is one of those events, rare events, which universities are supposed to have. And we are delighted here at Rubaga campus that this comes on the heels of other events that have been held here. We are increasingly seeing guest lectures being conducted here in the true vocation of academia, but more so to see our own coming up with writing books, putting observing what has happened and putting it on paper and ink. I think it is something that we are so delighted. And I would like to encourage all of us to continue writing. We have people here who are very prolific and want to appreciate them. There are those who are continuing, of course, to do research and publishing in journals. We want to appreciate them as well. So our chief guest, you are once again welcome to Uganda Matters University. I'm not so sure whether you have been here before, but come again. Take this as your home, and when we call you next time, please give us the honor and come again. Kaleebu, each other for a very long I'm a veterinarian, and the work which is done there is the source of many of these microbes. So come to this and I want once again for
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So without further ado and without preempting or getting this guest who has invited us, I have the honor to invite the Uganda Masters University Head of Press, Assistant Finance on the program, the one and only Professor Jimmy Spire.
David, congratulations. When nag so many people to contribute. I know when David nags you, you can't sleep, you can't breathe, all the time he will be around you sending long emails. And so I knew he would fulfill this. And it's good that it's coming at a time when he has just acquired a new golden tooth. Gets the occasion to laugh loud and everyone sees the tooth. And you enjoy. So David, congratulations and thanks so much. These are really conversations we should continue having. I know there is a lot that is being written and spoken about decolonization today. Decolonization in all sorts of angles, to the extent that some people have started saying that this has become a buzzword which is losing meaning because we are decolonizing roads, decolonizing literature, decolonizing law, decolonization and Afro-feminism, decolonization and this. Yeah, but it's not really to say that it's just fashionable. That's why many people are going to joining the conversation. But because we know in many ways coloniality, our coloniality is affecting so many things around us, affecting governance, affecting social order, affecting the academy, and that is an area where we need really to do a lot. Even as we publish this today, as we launch it, the question still lingers whether we should still continue our scholarship along the same lines of the North, even when sometimes we know that it doesn't really fit in well with our society. For instance, that we emphasize a lot of publication for promotion in universities, but we know that many of our people don't read what we write. We write books, many of which end up in shelves, a few people read, and we also discuss them in our echo chambers. Very important as those books are. I think we also have to think of alternative ways of disseminating the knowledge that we produce, and not only be satisfied with launching, writing books. We should constantly ask ourselves, who is reading us? Who is really receiving this knowledge that we are producing? We should look into other media, other popular media today. Not that the academy should always chase the crowds, but if people are so much into film, if people are so much into social media, how do we fit in? Yes, it is sometimes difficult, especially in the where many people don't pay attention. There is little time to ever pay attention to anything. We have a flux of so many things, including publications. How do we position ourselves in such a way that we are going to be listened to, we are going to be heard? Because people are not going to look for us. We will have to take ourselves there. Unlike in the past, maybe the earlier generations of scholars, where you had a few books being published and they were eagerly being waited for. Today you have so many, almost every day there is a book being launched. So how do we make sure that what we are producing gets to the public? How do we put it in different formats or different forms for our public? I think that's something very important for us to think about. University presses are facing a challenge today. We know that university presses don't really make money. Not many people are willing to buy scholarly books. If you put this book in a bookshop around here, and there are these motivation books, I don't know how many people will pick that and not maybe pick Rich Dad. Yes, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, those kinds of books. So it means that we have to push them in a different way, not just in the format in which, rather not just by financial support, but even for us as academics. If people are reading other stuff, unlike what we produce, what does that say to us? Should we insist on academic journals even when we know they are not being read? Should we find a way of balancing the two? Should we find alternative languages or a combination of languages? When I first joined Facebook, there was a senior colleague who asked me what I was doing on Facebook. A few years later, he sent me a friend request on Facebook because he soon realized that he could not stay away. Otherwise, the world has no problem leaving you behind and defining you out of existence. So we have to think a lot about what we produce. We have to think a lot about how to support university presses and to package them to the appeal of the public. I thank the Vice Chancellor on behalf of management for all that they do in support of the press. I know when I was in charge of the press, I recall the difficult sometimes of trying to convince finance, for instance, that we need to print a book. Okay, you tell us in very simple words, how is this book going to contribute to our... To what? The bottom line. Yes, how is this book going to contribute? For some books, you could really make an argument. But there are others which were important, but you could not attach monetary value to them. You couldn't argue that we should publish this because it's going to bring in this or that amount of money. And I believe that the university presses are established for a somewhat different reason than that of primarily for profit. I'm on the editorial board of Material University Press. And comparing the two, I really see that the challenges seem to cut across. Even in universities that are relatively better placed financially, there are people who still don't see the value in this. You say that we are a research-centered university, but when it comes to sometimes facilitating that research and production of knowledge, the story is different. So thank you, Professor Chairman and other members of management for that support. Yeah, as I end once again, I thank you all for making the time to come. I congratulate the contributors once again, and for those who managed to buy a copy, leave with a copy, I hope you read the book. Yeah, these days it's trend to collect books at launches and put them safely in our shelves until someone mentions it again. Say, why do I have that book? But you've never read it. I hope this one gets read. Thank you so much.
I believe that I thought what we agreed we would do when Dr. Spire speaks on goods, we have made our personal judgments on whether he's a better speaker than writer, or better context than speaker, or everything in between, or he's the best at everything he attempts to do. My conviction is that he's the best at everything he attempts to do, for which, to use his words, if I were that side of the club. He has triggered my personal thought on a number of things, and quite frankly, I'm not the kind that thinks very deeply. Now I can imagine what it must be for you who think deeper than I do. You must have left an indelible mark of thought on you and a number of things, from the whole broad idea of colonization. When he spoke about that, when I recall it had to produce itself, and I recall I have two foreign names of movers, one bunch they move in a very economic. Call me Simon, I feel quite incomplete. So if I say Simon Peter, then now I feel complete. I also have a set of my two traditional names, one of which none of you know, I can get from you know, the 11-letter surname. The Kasiate name that is moving around is the stage name. My actual surname is a different one, which hardly anybody knows, and I'm quite frankly don't care. But just miss out the Peter and Simon, then I feel you have introduced me quite up. So that's the whole colonization thing around the place. I don't know about you, that's the point of view on your part. He also speaks about the whole challenge that made even I feel very guilty, and I didn't want to let my eyes across the room because I didn't want to see fellow guilty faces. Those of us who collect books at launches, And most that we read of that book is the back part of it, which gives a summary, if you are lucky that it has one there. Other times it will just be an illustration, and all you remember that will be, yeah, that book, big picture at the back. Without opening the pages. The challenge is, can we read these books? But again, you are used to what everyone keeps saying in a rather derogatory way, that if you want to hide something from this part of the world, put it in a book. Even money, if you put it in a book, they will not find it, because they're not putting in the pages. So, this is supposed to be a recorder, now it is ringing. So I don't know whether it is the judge guys who are listening to phone conversations that are calling. Considering it's after Spire's speech. We now know really he's calling. So I won't take a lot of your time, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Allow me in a very special way, invite Professor David. I don't know whether I should. The T is silent. His name starts with a T. He pronounces it as Shimba. So many times I have to ask him whether the T is as consequential as the letter K in the word knife. So I don't know whether I should pronounce him like I normally prefer to pronounce knife. So Mr. Shimba, please come, step forward as the editor of this incredible piece of work. And then you will proceed after your remarks to invite the contributors to this body of work, of academic work, who you chose to write in your own handwriting on my program that I should invite. But I choose not to because, again, I am not sure at this point whether this is a handwriting or it's a drawing. So I leave the risk to you.
Thank you so very much, our events manager, event management consultant executive. I welcome you all as survivors of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. I think it is the only rightful title to use this afternoon. We are all survivors. Not only is Jimmy the survivor of quarantine, having gone through a very horrendous experience, and thanks to Jimmy, we all came to know about how horrendous it is to really be quarantined. But we are all survivors of this global quarantine that we experienced, and of which we are critically celebrating the 5th anniversary. So I want to thank you again for sparing the time to come for this very critical birthday, a birthday of a moment that left us unprecedentedly different. When the initial call for chapters for this book was released, in the very first wave of COVID-19, total lockdown in April 2020, we honestly anticipated that the book will hit the shelves the following year by August 2021. Both the editorial team at Uganda Matters University, headed by Jimmy and Nakabo, Dr. Nakabo, we were all enthused about the opportunity that the rare concentrated time which COVID-19 has afforded us in the lockdown. However, as the pandemic unfolded, it became much clearer to us that the coronavirus not only locked down our bodies, but also slowed down our writing process. It was a premature anticipation that a year from the COVID-19, the book will be hitting the shelf. My first order gratitude, therefore, is extended to the resilience and the commitment of all the contributors to this book. We don't have them all in the room today, but we physically have some, and I will mention them very shortly, who have really believed in this project and who committed to the care and the rigor that it demanded. In the same vein, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to two professors, one Sabelo Ndlovugacheni, a name that needs no introduction, and Professor Andrea Casatella, our very own at Makerere Institute of Social Research, for having respectively graced the manuscript with a critical foreword and an even more critical afterword. Together, the volume's contributors to this edition make a very valuable intervention in the study of global COVID-19 from the vantage point of African states and societies. With a few interesting exceptions, the attention to Africa in the COVID pandemic times was again very scant, as the West turned inward and the East too turned inward. The volume therefore fills a very important gap in the understanding of the pandemic. And while the contributors do not address their specific chapters to the direct medical science, those indeed in the scientific communities who constitute themselves as authorities in the COVID years, they ought to pay attention to what this volume suggests about what epidemiology can miss and yet learn from the careful studies of context such as the ones presented in this book. We all agreed after reading each other that the pandemic is too serious a matter to be left to epidemiologists and pathologists alone. We are very thankful that the chief discussant has agreed to come and join the social scientists conversation and push the envelope further. I will not preempt the discussant chief words. My second vote of gratitude, 7 copy editors who accept this manuscript pro bono. If on the other side, they peer-reviewed all the content moreover and provided invaluable language and style in very short practice. Allow me to acknowledge our Associate Professor Laura Otala, Habwe, Justin Lugolo, Dr. Yaya Seremba, and Cohen, and all of whom really edited most of the manuscript here. It's here to note that copy editing aside, double-blind peer review for at least 2 separate reviewers, rigor with which our Omu Press content for its publication. We received 11 chapters reviewed by 2 separate reviewers, all in pro bono. We equally thank therefore who ensure that the content of this and the ethics of academic we stand for and for which we are very proud. In a very special, allow me anonymous mention one peer reviewer who has field. He has gone into he has shown to us that is not back and do the editor can be lifted from the Professor Joe Loka for recognition. Here in capacity as the guest of honor, indeed, we cannot also discount, I hope I'm loud enough, we cannot discount the dates we owe to all the colleagues present and past in the Uganda Matters Directorate of Graduate Studies, Research and Enterprise for all the intellectual, logistical, moral, and selfless support rendered in the course of this book project. Dr. Robina Nakabo, under whose leadership the Umu Press survived the pandemic times, went against all call for duty and lent us indomitable administrative care for the initiation of this project to completion. In the same vein, I want to really thank the CAS Research Fellows, CAS Research Associates
and CAS research affiliates, as well as all the CAS politicians who are in and beyond Africa, who never cease to believe in the pertinence of this book. Of very special mention here, allow me to recognize the belief of Samora Onyango Okech Sanga. Please stand up for recognition. As a deep well-wisher of the State of Africa study, went on to offer us perhaps the most graphically telling book cover. He is the designer of this book cover with the help of and myself. He went on not only to imagine all the 330 pages words and to capture them in this one graphic. That's the mind of Samora. No amount of writing would really offer this. We really thank your imagination, and we pride ourselves in having you as the grandchild of Uganda Masters University. I really want to return the favor and thank the founding chair of the Center for African Studies, Professor Jimmy Setongo, who not only initiated the decolonization pathways, and ours is really pathways. We are not about pretending to offer decolonization, nor to spell out how it looks like. But in the wisdom of the founding chair, Professor Setongo thought it fit that our series should really be emphasizing the pathways. And it is not just a pathway, and we put an S to say that it is easier to understand what has gone on before us, and a lot more harder to predict what is coming after us. So all we can do is to keep emphasizing the S in whatever we do, because no one has the monopoly of this knowledge, and hence decolonization pathways. Lastly, the production of this book, as with all the publications under Umu Press, was backrolled by the Uganda Masters University Management. This is no mean commitment to context-relevant knowledge production and dissemination for a university such as ours, which is largely tuition dependent and with zero research funding from the government. We want to thank therefore the management of Uganda Masters University for seeing to it that the Decolonization Pathway book series are financially supported amidst so many competing priorities. Let me hope that we will find it worthy of our hard-earned 50,000 Ugandan shillings to buy and spare time to read this soon-to-be launched second volume of the Decolonization Pathway. So I'm told to introduce the book is an edited one, and being an edited book, we want to acknowledge the different chapter contributors. It was produced in the thick of the pandemic. As you know, I, for one, as an editor of the book, have never had a chance to meet all the contributors, let alone physically. The farthest I went was to see the email and fathom which kind of gender could this be. Now the emails don't even tell the gender, because someone was called Sifiso Dlovolo. And Sifiso Dlovo being from South Africa, I couldn't fathom the gender. We had to make some Zoom calls, and the old Zoom could give us was a very small square window where you could see someone's left ear, half of the nostril, a little bit of the air, and you couldn't really tell. That's the context in which all these chapters record. So today we are really missing a great number of contributors, not least for reasons very known to us of geography, financial constraints, and of course a very heavy schedule to put together all in the one room. But we had the forward that was graced to us by Professor Sabelo Dlovu-Dashedi, who was currently moved to UBC, the University of British Columbia, and they couldn't make it physically, but I think he's tuning in through our YouTube channel. Then we have Justin Lukolobi, who is our very own member of academic staff here with the competing agenda. She's running an end-of-class semester fortunately she couldn't come here. We have the first part of the book have Sifiso Dlovu, the sister to Sabelo Dlovu Gacheni, actually, by pleasant surprise. She's based at the University of Umhlanga in South Africa, and she couldn't make it, but she has promised to tune in online. The second chapter in part 1 was written by Simon Umada Isibo, our very own, whom I dragged in this room against his will to suspend everything and come. So Simon, please wave, and you are very much welcome to speak to your chapter. And then you'll be followed by Dr. Everest Gabirano, right after you. Dr. Everest Gabirano, who is now Miss. We're very pleased to have him in the room. He is the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Mountain of the Moon University in Fort Portal. We have another contributor, William Tayewa, together with Richard Kayira. Is Richard Kayira in the room? Fantastic, fantastic. First time to meet Richard Kayira, you cannot believe that that's true. We've had a back and forth email trail of 4 years. And this is my very first time. So please, we are pleased to have you, Richard. He's at the New Vision and an editor of both Bukede and New Vision Press. We have, finally, we have also Dr. Andrea Casatella, who's supposed to join us physically, if not tonight. Andrea Casatella is not in the room, but he's the one who provided us with a very cutting edge afterward. But for now, allow me to give the floor to those contributors in that order. We shall start with our very own Simon Isibo. Please come to the podium, and you have 5 minutes to speak whatever you find illuminating about what you spend time on writing the chapter. And the audience will be happy to know the arguments. And then Dr. Gabirano and Richard before.
Thank you, David. Dr. Nakago started reporting Egner, young. Maybe I should also report the African. With regard to not just thinking what has happened, but in terms of preparation, the African core that rose at the beginning of the day. So that's how I see this work. That is a preparation, not just to think, but if at all another pandemic occurs, then we are prepared to start well armed. I thought the best way to bring out what I have captured in these pages is to just give you a test by reading a what I did. Crossing the border, one interviewee narrated, whether at the official checkpoints or not, has become the question of mastering the hide and seek game. This was one of the responses in my correspondence with a member of the community along the borderline. According to this correspondent, the border people are willing to go through the COVID-19 test, but the problem is with the conditions of these tests. After every 2 weeks, a test is mandatory because the incubation period of the COVID-19 virus takes 2 weeks. Yet, the test is nauseating, and as such, it is disgusting. Meanwhile, the government was pushing the costs for conducting the tests on the shoulders of the person being tested. Due to these factors, the borderland people choose to look for alternatives to testing measures, which would be interpreted as defiance or trading on an illegal path. Such an option is not new to the communities across the border. Mark you, they had their own open markets functional as opposed to regular markets. The defiance path is not limited to the people living in communities across the border. Even the non-members of these communities come on the border for some time as they borrow a leaf from the sons and the daughters of the borderland on how to beat the government at its own game. To some, this would be interpreted as playing with fire, for the government's procedures are meant to safeguard the people. This interpretation may be true, but the question is, why are they taking this risk? My point of view is that there is something greater for these people than the government procedures. So if you want to continue, that's just a test.
Thank you.
So I have already been introduced. My name is Kaleebu, as they said. So just to give my reflection on what I wrote in the chapter. This chapter is on page 235. So that year when COVID-19 happened, I was writing my PhD thesis. So for me, it was more of an opportunity to complete my writing. I had shifted from Makere, the miser environment, to Fort Portal, my home area. That's where I was writing from. So this piece of writing is a reflection, first and foremost, of what was going on, but also reflecting on the theme of the volume of humanity, and also what I was writing about. I bring in that academic approach. First of all, I was writing on issues of identity, politics. These are issues of governance, and how they explain contemporary problems. And I was comparing two districts, two regions, Uganda and Tigezi, and Menzoli. So when you read my reflection, I begin by trying to show how that theme and element comes into play in the COVID-19 story. Someone had already told you about how we are survivors, but some people are more survivors than others. How the story unfolded, how the world responded, and how Africa responded, and then Uganda, how Uganda responded. It was in a different way. While in other neighboring countries, like Tanzania, there were no lockdowns. Immediately, our response in Uganda was lockdown. I had not talked with him. I was in Uganda, so trying to PhD. But that story of how Ugandans were being handled as they returned, it was a big story that really bordered on these issues of governance. How the whole situation. So when you read my work, I'm not going to read a piece like CEO has done, but only reflect on what I wrote. You see how I reflect on how it voted on the colonial indirect rule administrative approach, how it voted on that, in the way it's executed, how it was executed, how it voted on the indirect rule system of governance, and how this could speak to ethnic handling of the lockdown. And later on also reflected on how issues of gender could also reflect the own way of approach of governance, in which males became dominant and women were domesticated. And you remember during that time what was happening in families and so on. So I also sing out that one. But then go also on the borders of elements where we see that the lockdown also reflected an element where there were some form of nationalism. I was doing well without it. I think, yeah, where there was some kind of consciousness of nation as a country, in a way in which, of course, people, where there was some elements of integration and way of recognizing that we are people of same residence, rather than division on religion and ethnicity. So I also hint on that and conclude that those elements of nationalism, which are a key, are useful for us to reflect, even as we think, as we prepare for anything, for any eventuality, are very good elements for us to reflect on and see as a nation that brings us together when we are responding to pandemics of that nature. So those are the reflections I give in my piece of contribution to this volume, and I hope to stop here. I want to also recognize my friend David Shimba. If it was not him, I think maybe I wouldn't have, but he kept on me saying you must contribute. And so that's how this piece, any piece of academic writing is, we must acknowledge the contribution of friends. You cannot succeed without friends. So I must say that David's knocking on me was key to having this piece of work put in this. And I must also thank Uganda Matters University. I don't know where you get these resources, the Vice Chancellor. I think we have a lot to learn. They have said I am Dean, but I am head of Department of Humanities. I'm not Dean. Of Mountains of the Moon University, a new government university with the research and innovation funds. So, but to see that an institution like Uganda Matters University with little resources, depending on tuition, can do such is something to borrow a leaf and begin to say that this is a masterpiece. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be here. I bring to you apologies from Dr. William Taebwa, who is unable to be with us. Together we contributed on a topic about communication. It's COVID-19 and the economic downturn of the indigenous press in Uganda. What is intriguing, 7 publications were closed during COVID, indigenous publications. And it was like a temporary measure. 5 years down the road, none of the 7 is back. So that is intriguing. So the colonial strand that comes out, of course we all understand that the biggest advertiser is government. But because these publications are in local languages, the biggest budget goes to English newspapers. So apparently, indigenous press is starved, and it is a colonial strand. So it is intriguing that 5 years down the road, none of the 7 is back, and there is typically no signs of resurrecting any of the 7. So probably we'll be following up in the 3rd volume, updating on whether 1 or 2 probably would have gathered momentum of coming back to life. Thank you so much.
Now, to welcome finally afterward, Dr. Kasat. Please come to the share with us or the book.
Let me try to go. So one of the issues I think that was key in the book is the connection between the epistemic and the theory, and to what extent is a challenge in fact to make a system possible simply by an access to the epistemic. And so the question here would be to see the relation between the epistemic and the political in a dialectical manner. Now, especially the chapters that were focusing on indigenous resources, traditional medicine. I think they didn't go far enough in questioning the entire system of epistemic validity of modern science, and that the fact that epistemic validity is fundamentally connected to political structure that established an hegemony of science. And so in reflecting, the possibility of reflecting in fact on what could be another understanding of validity from indigenous sources pushes us also to think about how the cultural enter into this relationship between the political and the epistemic. And so it is not, I don't see it as simply a dialectic between one or the other. But if there is a possibility that there is the decolonization comes from frameworks and values that are centered on indigenous knowledge, I think that the question of culture runs through both and needs to be articulated as such. So I think that my major point was around these questions. The praising of the book has been done by others. So I was just entering this little point. There is another question I think that runs through the book implicitly. Is the question of biopolitics. I think that the entire book can be read through biopolitical lenses. And what we witnessed, I think, in COVID-19 was the idea that at work in this political economy of the distribution of the vaccine was not simply a biopolitics, but maybe even a necropolitics. And there was a decision about who were the subject that who died first in the global scale. So I think that even a reflection on the question of biopolitics, and that reflection requires also inquiring what is the fundamental understanding of life. When this understanding of life displays from a biomedical model and brought that to cultural understanding and interpret the biological, then there is also here a possibility of reconnecting to the cultural dimension that I was referring to. So these were two of the main venues which I towards the end.
Thank you very much. Like distinguished gentlemen and ladies, you now get a sense of the variety of contributions that we have in this book. Lends credence to the clarion call made earlier, and it's a book worth reading, because then you get to pick insights from different perspectives that will enrich ourselves on the subject matter. Now, Dr. Shimba, you did photos on a mission. I see Dr. Discussant, the head of the Department of Philosophy from Makerere University, Kampala, who also made a contribution to this book. Before we go to the next speaker on the program, may I have the pleasure to invite him to come and share with us his 1 to 7 around his contribution to this book. Then we can proceed. I think it was a trick. Shimba did not forget it because he was sitting right in front of him. There's no chance he could have seen it.
No, it's because he had not seen most of us. The talk, as he said, he didn't know me. just online. So good afternoon, everyone. I contributed a chapter on COVID-19 and health industry in the East African community. There's a question that has permeated much of my research. There's the question of the unfinished business of African freedom. We have not examined that question and finalized it. Are Africans fully decolonized? It always pops up towards 9 October, isn't it? We always throw jabs at the government, spy against cartoons, isn't it? Those this and there, whether we are truly independent and all those questions. But what I want you to think when you're reading that chapter, it's very hard to put philosophical ideas on paper. They are always in the mind, but when you begin to write, they disappear. Then when the editors begin to edit back and forth, many things fly out. And finally, what you really want to express doesn't do what? Come out. But what's happening is this. There's a colonization taking place in the health industry. What they call the health industry hegemony, what they call the pharmaceutical hegemony, which is now being expressed in terms of vaccines. Everything is developing a vaccine for it. So the health industry has become an avenue for a struggle for independence. Can Africa really provide for their own health without depending on the former colonial what? That's the debate we had during COVID-19. So, okay, according to me, that's the debate I had. So I have, my wife is a health practitioner. So we had a lot of back and forth in the house. You know, we are all locked down and we can now part of each other, isn't it? So some percent we should use traditional medicine. What she's saying, we should take the what? The vaccine. So we had a debate in the house. And as I was writing this paper, that's what was going through my mind. And as time has gone on, Dr. David, I don't know whether you have noticed that your book is now already, the events have already past it. Now we are looking at post what?
Yeah.
The debate on whether these vaccines were actually really necessary or not. We still have that question to answer. So, I want you to think when you read the chapter is the health industry hegemon, which is now becoming a political space for struggle to express our independence, as Dr. Spire initiated this series. Yeah, we really independent in the health sector. We focus more on looking at soldiers walking and marching on 9th October. And inspired those cartoons of their boots and all these things. But there's another soldier with a syringe who's an agent of colonialism. And we haven't examined that area. I've never even seen inspired blood cartoon on that one, isn't it? So we haven't examined that area. There are orders that come from different angles. So when I discuss the issue of neo-functionalism in that chapter, I'm trying to examine the fact that the avenue for colonialism has changed, has shifted. There's a new colonial state, which is no longer in Nakasero, no longer in Kololo, no longer in Mbuya. It is in white pots with gowns and syringes and defining your life the core of your DNA. We haven't examined that question deeply as Africans, and this book opens that discussion. I hope so. And I hope that we can now examine the decolonization in that dimension. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kaleebu. And now, again in the spirit of what we started off with, and I said, my work has always been made easier, especially with new technological advancements. You type in a question and AI gives you an answer and you go with that, and everyone uploads you as one of the best and most professional people. So, Shimba here used AI to find contributors. Never helped them at all. They also used AI to find the contributions, I suspect. Now they put them in a book, and the book is a masterstroke of literal genius. And we thank you.
Try volume 3 with AI. See what's coming.
But he raised very important points, and couldn't have raised them in a better place, in a better audience. But even more importantly, in front of our guest of honor, who I must say, couldn't afford a better one, considering the colonization allegation of the new colonialist carrying syringes. Our guest of honor is the chief at the Uganda Virus Research Institute, where there's a lot of research going into the next vaccine on HIV and AIDS. So it was a very important question that should the vaccine be Africanus, as scientists want to call it, something Africanus, or it remains something vaccine, Europeanus and Americanus and all that. But again, in my own experience, during that time, you recall very well that we had a breakthrough in the treatment of COVID by one of our local professors, Professor Wan, of the COVID expert. I had the pleasure to interview him for my personality profile program. At that time, it was called Desert Analysis. Now it's called Incredible Life Stories. And what I remember very well is that he attributed his discovery not so much from the science he read in school, for the many years he was in school to learn to be a medical doctor, but from the observation of what his otherwise illiterate manner was gathering as local herbs and remedies for ailments they had that manifested similar symptoms then as COVID did now. So he went back, rather than flip through pages of books written by professors of this and the other from leather, he went back to a place where he took a root which leaf his mother would ask him, and I hastened to add, I think he preferred to use the same, you know how herbs are boiled. I do not boil on boils herbs in a brand new saucepan. It has to be old and they don't wash it just before the boiling. It has to come with previous sweet. So, and then I joked him, I said, now I understand why a drop of Comidex through my nasal cavity elicits nothing but sneezing upon sneezing. So I don't know whether it was the game for or the COVID left me from the sneeze. That's still a conversation that researchers here will share with us in earnest. Now, we are now through with the conversations and contributions from the contributors of the book. So it's now my humble pleasure to get closer with you towards the launch of this book. I have the singular pleasure of inviting a man who comes from a long strain of education in terms of imparting education to masses, and he has kept to the old family tradition. As we've heard President Newman say, and I think he's trying to be true to what he says. He says, usually when your father is a huntsman, it's always important that you carry on the trade, and normally you also be taught from your grandfather was a huntsman. The same applies to those who are to be, potters, those who make pots. The mission, I can see their child is making a cover of a good book like this one. So if you're president of a Rotary Club, normally your son should be president of the Rotary Club. And then the president of anything, then your son should be president of something. So here we have a vice chancellor who's an educationist coming from a long line, and I'm trying to provoke him to share his life story, one incredible life story, to tell us who his parents are, where they taught him. Because he's teaching and we know he must have picked up from somewhere. So, Mr. Vice Chancellor, very humbly, with those not very few words, it's my humble pleasure to invite you to speak to us as your guests today. But before you come, most importantly, I'm told you will have also to perform the duty of decorating the chief guest and inviting him to speak. Now, I don't know whether decoration and invitation are the same according to tradition yet. We'll wait to see. Again, before you come, I wish to ask all of us to recognize the presence of two incredible student leaders with us here. We have the Uganda Mothers University Guinea President, is your dad our friends who are from material will know that the things flow in the blood nowadays. Then we also have the governor of the Uganda Mothers University Uganda campus, who are our hosts today. These two gentlemen have done an incredible work in trying to put their fellow students into the path of appreciating being in school beyond just being in the classroom. So they have managed to ensure that in this room we have a number of students represented, because they believe that the whole student should not be that who attends classes only, but one who participates in other activities around the university, if for nothing else, to get a broader view of what education should be. So thank you very much. And we hope that when there are other calls, you will realize more students, your fellow students, attend to those causes. And of course, this will not have serious personal ramifications or challenges. That's the challenge to do how we lead the students to get involved in other matters to understand their education. So, Mr. Vice Chancellor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon Peter. I'm now schooled on how to refer to Simon Peter, not Simon. Yeah, and our conversation will be on something else, hopefully, when the occasion comes, because the desert island disc has already captured my life story. And I was honored to have it in 2 episodes. So, two subsequent Sundays were about challenge. So I think we will carve out something. Thank you very much. Yes. Our chief discussant, Prof.Pontiano Kaleebu, the campus director, the campus leadership, the editor, and the contributors, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, good afternoon or good evening for that. It's a pleasure for the university to be able to put together something like this, because indeed, like the director of the graduate school said, it's a noble cause that the university has to produce and disseminate knowledge. And this is one such occasion when we come to disseminate our thoughts about things that we sometimes observe but take for granted, and other insights that we think we have that might also benefit other people and the practices of other people. So it is indeed an honor for Uganda Matters University, and my honor as the Vice Chancellor to be witness in such moments. Like one of the contributors commented, it's not that we have the resources, we are just committed to doing what needs to be done. Because as a student of leadership, I have learned that you can only accomplish what you prioritize. There are so many choices, but what you choose to prioritize is what normally gets your attention, and you invest the resources that are required. I would also like to recognize and thank, because I've not seen that name on the program. We've seen the contributors, but I think you will agree with me that the longest moment you spend about yourself, especially for the ladies, is before the mirror. Because you want to look at your identity. How am I going out today? I know that Dr. Sylvia Tamale might not agree with me, but I think it is evident on her that she also spends time on how she's going to leave her house to face the family. Now, why I say this is important, because the identity determines the reception sometimes. And that's why people endeavor to look the way they do. So there is among us a gentleman who has given this masterpiece identity, because that cover is what will attract you to pick this book from the shelf and flip the pages. And therefore, I think it deserves recognition. And when I studied this, it was really very well inspired. You see a face that is masked. Remember, we had to even decolonize the masks. Because all you needed was a piece of cloth, some thread, and a needle, and you were able to make your mask. So we see a mask there. I've also seen in there the leaves that nearly everyone here became herbivorous at that time of COVID. I don't know, by show of hands, who of us did not drink anything from boiled leaf in that building? Our team discussant. No. Unless no other thing, but then later, one of us managed to come up with the packaging of the leaf in a colonial presentation, and that became the bottled Covidex. So Covidex became more receptive to people because it didn't appear like the heavily suited saucepans that Kasada. It was more colonized. It looked more colonial and more superior to what the others were doing. And of course, with it came a lot of injections because we all had to have vaccines. those of us who had vaccines and let aside seeing the vaccine, the anti-vaxxers starting to say all sorts of things, we started imagining whether we had made the right choice. But at least I completed all the jobs. If there is any consequence, I am yet to see. Yes. And there was a lot of money that exchanged hands in that. Not to be quoted, we saw so much development in the real estate industry at that time. So it is indeed a very rich picture. And who is the man behind that? None other than Samora Onyango Kate Sanga. Please, can you stand? Yeah, like Simon Peter has just said, our being is sometimes influenced by our backgrounds. And so this wonderful artist is sandwiched by the parents. So Professor Oloka and Professor Sylvia Tamale, thank you for giving him that gene of expressing his mind. Yeah. Now, when David told me about the book launch, he had wanted it to happen in February. Even earlier. But I advised him that you can't launch something about COVID in 2025 and miss the 5th anniversary of the COVID lockdown, which was March 20th, 2020. So we said it better be on that very day. And if the man who was spending sleepless nights is available, why can't he come and be the chief discussant? And we are very honored to have Prof.Pontiano Kaleebu as our chief discussant, because COVID was something that kept you out of bed for longer hours, probably, than you ever had, except when you were in that. When you had to live on the wall. So, we are indeed happy that this could be pulled off on this day, and we thank you for having it. He told me it was about decolonization pathways, and he was linking it to COVID-19, and I wondered how COVID-19 and colonialism are even related. Because I come from a science background, I am a surgeon, and when you talk of COVID-19 and then you bring in decolonization, you lose me. So somewhere I had to find myself, because I had to go and read and say, so where are these things? I tried to find meaning in that title. And I searched at least two words. What is colonization and what is decolonization? And some of us here might be in the same space, asking, what are these? And of course, when Dr. Andrea Casatella came, I'm sure he confused many of us even before. So now I want to deconstruct a few of these things and demystify them. Now, the subjugation of one group by another is what Young defines colonization. So then I said, now, how does this relate to COVID? But then I remember we were actually not colonized by COVID, we were colonized with an R. But that R sometimes becomes an L in some dialects. So we were actually colonized, we were subjugated by COVID. And had to stay indoors, we had to put on things, we had to distance ourselves. To the extent that even to get a visa, you had to show you had been vaccinated, some of us who later traveled. But on the sad note, maybe, but later turned out to be something I overcame. Probably I was supposed to have been with Spire in the quarantine. But I came in a little earlier than I did. because
You were a little known.
I was attending a meeting in Hamburg, at the University of Hamburg, and traveled back on Valentine's Day, February 14th. On the 16th of February, I was taken ill with a very high fever, congested chest. All the things we were reading about the COVID symptomatology, I was defining in me. So I decided to quarantine myself in my house. Fortunately, I have a house that can allow me to quarantine myself. And the only person who could come to my room was my wife. And that carried on for a few weeks until about mid-March. And we were using everything that was coming to be known about that would help you get through this situation. So around I think it was about the 10th of March, I had to return to work because I'd taken off that time to rest. And I don't know if there was anyone happier than I was when the lockdown came, because the fatigue was too much to bear. The post-illness, acute illness fatigue. So when they locked down, I was happy I was going to get time to rest, because my office did not allow me that much luxury to rest. So that is my small story about COVID. So probably I was among the first in the COVID trail, but lucky to survive. So we thank God for that moment. So indeed we are survivors of COVID. So when I read about colonization and decolonization, I had to find out what decolonization means. And of course that is the effort of trying to get yourself out of the situation, to re-identify yourself and make sure that you regain your dominance as a people, as a nation, and any other belonging that you want to put to it. But the book that I read, and I don't know if the social scientists will agree, gave 5 phases of decolonization. Now, when we were doing leadership of change, there were these those phases of grief. And now I see 5 phases of decolonization, and it looks very painful. But the 5 phases are, first, there is rediscovery and recovery. So your identity has probably been taken up by the colonizers, like a colonial did. We had to appear in masses. We had to walk at least 2 meters apart. And such gatherings were never possible. So probably we are decolonizing and decolonizing by rediscovering our usual lives and recovery from all that. But the second stage is mourning. The second stage is mourning. And this is probably part of it in the book. There has been a lot of lamentation in the book about a few of these experiences in the COVID era. The third phase is described as dreaming. Dreaming when we start imagining whether our indigenous identities and knowledge and practices were actually ever okay, and if so, how can we ever have possibility of releasing them? So you start dreaming. You start dreaming. And I think in here we have the Covidex that comes in, like Simon Peter was saying. Professor Ogwang remembered that his mother used to prepare these concoctions and patients would get better. So he was dreaming of a possibility that he could bring this to reality during COVID, which he successfully did. And so we now have a a rebirth of ethnobiology in many science and research areas, recognizing that actually we can do a lot more with our usual herbs and plants and tree barks and everything. The fourth stage is commitment. So now we need to commit that the challenges we have faced need to be addressed. And then take action as the fifth stage. So I think here we are taking action by disseminating and traditional medicine. I think those terminologies come from the colonial mindset in which we look at it. And that is why COVID-19, even in the medical circles today, does not receive the reception it should. Because we are still wear the colonial mask that it can only be when it is something run through a biosafety 4-level lab and so on that can become packaged as a medicine. But we've seen that Providence works. I use it, but not that I can say anything more. Again, because of the colonial. But we see that big economies like China and Korea, even in their medical schools, they have what they call the Western European medicine and the Chinese medicine. And the Chinese medicine is now being packaged in a manner that can be brought here. But we find it effective. In any case, they rarely go to America or to Europe for treatment. Instead, it's the reverse. So there is something we need to look at in decolonizing even our own medicine, because that is called Chinese traditional medicine. And it does seem to work. So I think we should be looking at it. And then, of course, we need to know that all this was working, although not well documented and evidenced in a manner that would allow improvement and replication. But when you read about the Caesarean sections that were happening in Europe, where I come from, there was documentation of that in 1790. No, actually in 1879, by a Scottish medical student who was traveling with the explorers, the colonial, and found that pregnant ladies in discard labors were successfully delivered by Caesarean section. And yet the first successful Caesarean section in Britain was in 1794, which means there's not much lag. And that means we also had our own successful practices, of course. But because we were subjugated, we accepted that these were rudimentary methods. And they were not documented because we depended on oral tradition and a lot of mentorship and being able to just pass on to the next in line in the family. That has been lost. That has been lost. So this is where I think the title of this book comes through, looking at our African responses. And we shall soon hear from the chief discussant, a man of modern virus research. And this having been one of the biggest viral pandemics we've had, following the influenza and, of course, the HIV, which we still live in. HIV, people forget it's a pandemic. It's because we lived in it for too long. It comes as in-house name, we are no longer worried. But it is. So, Professor Kaleebu, we are very honored that you would consider to be here at this moment to share with us. And we look forward to that. And before I invite you formally, I've been asked to decorate you. So please, I'll ask you to step forward. Yes, And what I'm going to do is to claim you, because now this is part of Corona. I'm going to claim you as a proud member of the fraternity of Uganda Matters University. Please accept it and feel proud to associate.
I like photos. They make sense when you have a background that reminds you.
Oh, yes.
I think, can you try? Very good.
Yeah, it's now my singular honor and pleasure, Prof.Pontiano, to invite you to address.
Thank you very much, and I'm very honored to be here. I rarely address an audience of this kind. And in fact, when I was first invited, when David contacted me, I didn't take it. I thought, then he started talking about the book. I was a little bit confused. I said, is he talking to the right person inviting me? And initially I thought he wanted me to be here. But sooner later that I realized he was even talking about being a guest of honor, discussant. So it was really a very unusual situation. But I'm very, very honored to be here in front of you. First of all, let me thank you, the Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Nyango, Professor Tambare, and all the guests who are here, the students and the staff of Uganda Matters University. It's my first time to be hosted by Uganda Matters University, and I think it's a moment I will not forget. So I was invited to be a chief guest on the launch of this book, Decolonization Pathways, Coloniality and African Responses to COVID-19. Just like the Vice Chancellor, I had also to go and educate myself a little bit, because I was moving into unfamiliar territory, so I had to educate myself. But you have clearly explained, and it was very good, you did better. But then there was also coloniality, and that systems of power and knowledge that emerged from colonialism that continue to shape our societies and even shape us the way we do after the colonial masters. And I started believing that really this is the reality. Sometimes we forget. But you start thinking about it, a lot of the things we do really are very much connected to that colonial period and will never go away. So really, the topic became a little bit more and more, started getting more. Indeed, it's tomorrow actually, that will be 5 years since we first reported the first case of COVID-19. This was a Ugandan who was coming, a businessman who was coming from Dubai, tested positive, and on the 30th of March, actually, that's why we had the total lockdown. But from 21st, I think 22nd, the president started slowly by slowly, closing you slowly by slowly. Don't do this, don't walk by this time. And then on 30th March, it was total lockdown. It was indeed an experience that I've not faced before in my career. Every time they tested, you used to hear on the radio, TV, they tell you somebody has tested positive. But then they tested anybody positive. In the initial days, our technicians or scientists, they first used to tell me, doctor, professor,
we have a case. And what I used to do was the next person to tell, no, was the Minister of Health, General Sachet. And then he tells the President. And after telling the President, then they put together the report, and then they announce. And that continued for some days. They test, they inform me, I inform the Minister informs the President, and then they announce. So really, at that time, you were in the hands of COVID and the hands of the science. You were and the President. You were in our hands.
Very good hands.
The world and Uganda were in a state no one ever imagined. The fear was there. And it was real fear. For all of you on television, as you used to watch, it was real fear. And in the first lockdown, people were very, very, very receptive. They were running to lock themselves. The fear was there. Many of you were at home. All you could do was to wait with the regular briefs from the President, from WHO, and from the scientists. It was a busy time. And many of you did not know even you had a virus such as this, which was established in 1936. Next year, we are celebrating 90 years. But you got to know about UVRI during COVID. Even some of you, many of you got to know me as a scientist. But I've been there for many years. So COVID really made a difference. You got to know Tony Fauci. Tony Fauci of NIAID, a great scientist who has visited many times Uganda, and we have hosted him many times. Tony Fauci. Countries were really locked up. The economy went to a downward trend, and no one was sure of the future. I used to get calls. I remember the numbers, and then you know, now this is State House. That is State House. And you say, Uzay wants to talk to you. And you say, okay. Pontiano, good morning. So what is this now? So I got to know, get those calls, regular calls, you see them. And sometimes he was following, always following what we were doing. And there were issues. Sometimes scientists behind don't agree. The president asks you, you give your view, you argue with him. Okay, do this. Very interesting time. But with the time, COVID came to pass as a threat. But this is not the end of epidemics and pandemics. And this book, therefore, the writing becomes irrelevant, because we need to learn from COVID. But it is not the end. A few days ago, we had a scientific conference to talk about viruses, potential viruses. In bats, we found there thousands of viruses in bats, but they have never crossed into humans. If any of those, and one of the things we're talking about, how do you predict which virus could cross into humans? There are ways you can predict. You can sequence the virus. The virus normally uses the receptors to enter your cells. You see, you look at the amino acids of the virus. Is there mutations that could come, one mutation, two mutations, so that this region can attach to one of your receptors? So there are some ways that you can do that. Some, but it's dangerous, go further to do some experiments with some of these viruses. We don't know whether Wuhan scientists were doing that, and badly things went wrong, but we need to be prepared that pandemics and outbreaks will come, but we need to be better prepared. Hence, this book and the chapters and everything that has been written is very relevant. The book has taken the angle of coloniality and decolonization. Decolonization pathways, looking at coloniality and the African response to COVID-19. I've given many talks, many scientific talks to different audiences, as I've said, but this is my first time to launch a book and to really talk about issues of political science, Professor Nyango's areas, a few of your areas. They're outside. They're not my topics, but I feel close because of what we've gone through. So I responded positively to David, but I've also learned. He has also helped me to learn. So thank you once again. The book, as you have heard, is an edited book with 11 contributors and 11 chapters. And I was very pleased to see some of the contributors. Because I was reading, I could not put a name to the face. And I was very pleased to see some of these contributors. The book has shared continental experiences from different scholars, most not public health experts, except the one that was very close as a wife, who is a medic. Oh, he has gone very much invested. There were few of the contributors that really were writing from a public health point of view. And some of the authors argue that scientists took over and dominated the space to themselves. Maybe because NBS, CNN, Bukede, Mr. Kaira there, New Vision, everyone, it was science. It was science. And the book says, especially epidemiologists, some of these authors say, they amplified their voices loudest, they listened less to their counterparts in the larger medical science community, and spoke the loudest to the government. What could we do? What could we do? What could we do? The others remain spectators. Spectators. The social scientists, the political scientists, etc., were in the periphery. Yet COVID was a social, political, and economic problem. And I think you have a reason. And you're right. COVID was beyond science. It affected social life, political life, economic life. And in fact, for us, at Uganda Virus Statistics, we addressed our research in a multidisciplinary way to understand COVID, not only the virus, but we did studies that looked at mental health, social science, and a few other areas, because we know that, and that is how we are addressing it. Ebola, Mpox, we have all these teams that are looking in a more broad way. But I think we are reminded that when we address all these issues, we need to do this. Indeed, COVID-19 did not just manifest itself as an epidemiological crisis. It was by and large a social crisis. So the book mentions, and I quote, that the response to COVID epidemic indicated beyond doubt how outdated our thinking is as we run for scientism as a solution when it only treats symptoms and not actual causes of the recurrences of zoonotic and viral attacks. End of quote. The book touches on how COVID-19 led to recolonization of African life. Because a lot of what we're talking about, the science, was from the north. Everything, we're looking at the north. We're looking at the north. The interventions in the north, WHO, what is WHO saying? What is Tony Fauci saying? Everything looking at the north. To some, it brought the memories of colonialism. To make it worse, even most of the African countries that have ties with the north, when they were reporting our COVID came in, they were travelers from their colonial countries. Britain, we had a lot of people who came from outside, from Asia and the rest of it. When we started seeing many here from Britain, you go to Senegal, maybe from France, you go somewhere from Spain, even the virus was reminding us. Science appeared to belong to the north. Instructions came from the north. The vaccines came from the north. The book also further talks about the locking of the borders that also remind us of colonialism, narrates that foreign people, you lock your borders, you fear the foreigners, foreign people, foreign goods are the source and danger and became vulnerable. The idea of the state and the tightening of the borders that was deeply ingrained on coloniality as a global power structure. I was part of the Scientific Advisory Committee for COVID and the Vaccine Advisory Committee. We regularly met many times on Zoom to discuss, to review what is going on, and to advise the minister. Most times we agreed, but sometimes there were some disagreements. The book gives a lot of experiences and how this COVID brings back the mentalities and really stimulates and provokes us to find new ways of addressing such outbreaks. But of course the book, when you read each author, they have different views on a number of things. There are different views. Some people say, oh, we used a lot of the North, colonialism, the methods of colonialism. You know, in those days when there was an outbreak, the colonialists used to quarantine you, they used to bring the chiefs in force. And people said, maybe this is not the best way. But then somebody says in the book, countries responded differently. Uganda, and especially Rwanda, were praised by one of the authors because they took an approach that appeared like colonial methods in using the military. That the response in these countries was equated to a war. While Uganda used militaristic languages, the language was, Rwanda actually used the military. Their approach accounts, and this author says, there are low numbers of COVID-19 infections in the two countries. That is, brings us, so there's some good in the colonial approach. There's militarism. When it comes to Tanzania, Tanzania was a very interesting country, and when you read the book, it's really very interesting. It's a country that completely disregarded the WHO and the scientific approach in the response. And these differences in response with the neighboring countries brought tension. Tightening of the borders, strict SOPs. Tanzania says we don't have COVID, Uganda says we have COVID. And that again affected the communities and raised some issues of coloniality of state borders. The book questions the effectiveness of the health governance system in the region. When I read that part, I felt a bit of a shame. Because we showed some weaknesses in our health systems in the region. It was a shame to me because for some time we have been made efforts to ensure that we harmonize our response to outbreaks and epidemics in the region. But if you see that we did not do a good job, it's a shame. COVID exposed us. Indeed, as the authors mentioned, we disagreed on how, for instance, to treat the truck drivers. We used different testing algorithms where each country was saying, your results are false. Kenya was saying, your results are false. Uganda is saying, your results are false. Why couldn't we harmonize and have better systems to respond? This is even more recent. When we had mpox, recently we had mpox. Our country, when we tested at UVRI, we said, you know, mpox will be with us. The country, the ministry delayed a little bit to announce. Then Kenya announced they have mpox. And they said, this mpox has come from Uganda. That was a bit of an embarrassment. Because the traveler was coming from Uganda. We had not said anything. And the moment they said, we announced that actually we had seen mpox. Marburg, they said. Tanzania had Marburg. They kept quiet. We had rumors. People are calling us, have you heard there's Marburg in Tanzania? Tanzania official government said, no, we don't have it. For us, we started tightening our borders. Colonialism. We started putting people at the border. With Tanzania said, we are hearing. Then after some time, Tanzania said, yes, we have Marburg. So those mentalities, we need to do better in our way we are addressing these outbreaks. I was at a meeting in Dar es Salaam a few days ago, and one area we have been addressing is again to do better coordination with viral disease surveillance in the region. As I said, Tanzania's response was interesting, and many of the authors, some of the authors keep bringing Tanzania. I think you had contributors from Tanzania. 5 of them. Yeah. And it had 2 contradictory categories of engagement. The first category was of cooperation with WHO, COVID-19 based management practices. And this cooperation is depicted, perpetuated as coloniality. Then they had also the approach of non-cooperation stance, where which was precursors to decolonization, as the author says, because they embedded some elements of resistance to WHO. We don't have COVID. Don't put on masks. Don't distance. President Mafuguri was very, very serious on this. No COVID. The stance of non-cooperation. I agree with the authors that this time the decolonial approaches were a bit shallow. The author says probably the primary purpose of this approach was the consolidation of economic growth as well as personal and the party political position. Many of us were very puzzled when Tanzania was saying we have no COVID. But our fellow scientists were telling us quietly that things are not good. Things are not good. So the situation was not good because of this decolonization, colonization. The decoloniality stance of Tanzania, of course, also brought some benefits. And authors talk about how Tanzania was really benefited in discussing indigenous knowledge. So what you have been talking about, COVIDX and all that, and all the apps, maybe what some of the benefits of decoloniality. Yeah? How do we think about addressing these issues at a local level? COVID-19 promoted traditional and alternative medicines in some of these countries, Tanzania and in Uganda. And the president himself was very, very emphatic on coming up with our own local solutions. You may want to know what happened to our vaccine. Was the vaccine real? The vaccine was real. In fact, I'm not talking about the money, but I'm talking about the science that we did. The little money we got for COVID to develop a vaccine, our scientists really developed 2 vaccines, at least at the Uganda Virus Institute. One is inactivated vaccine, and another one of our scientists was able to identify a vector. You know the vaccine from Oxford, Challux, there is a vector of an adenovirus from a chip. So our scientists at the Uganda Virus Institute identified another adenovector from a chip and developed a vaccine. And both these vaccines went into animal studies at the vet school in Makerere. And they've been safe and immunogenic. But what is now missing, we can't move further, because to move to humans, you need vaccines that are produced in a good manufacturing practice, GMP, and there's that hard. But it is bringing dividends, because one of the scientists that made the vaccine in the chip adeno has been able to win additional funding from UK. She got about £3 million to develop a vaccine for Crimean Congo. So the science, at least for us in virus, the science was real. It stimulated local innovation. We also started another program called the In Vitro Therapeutics Program, a project at UVRI, whereby we are working with herbalists, local herbalists, because local herbalists, some of them, first of all, they fear to work with scientists. There's that sort of you will steal my knowledge, you will do that. You need to bring the trust. But what we did through Preside and Delta Science Technology and Innovation is to create a program whereby you work with herbalists, you do in vitro studies. And I have another scientist whose project was given to look at in vitro studies. You get the herb in the lab, you see what do they do to the virus, what do they do to the cells, and then if they are good, then you advise and they move further. Through that, we have worked with, I think, Busitema University and other universities that have traditional medicine departments. And one of the hubs was recently, they did a clinical trial at Makerere. The reason sometimes some of us have some hesitance with drugs like COVID-19, if we have not gone through a randomized clinical trial, it's difficult. If you tell me from where I was cured by this COVID-19, how many were not cured? So it's very difficult. So we need to mix some herbs with science. I'm not yet convinced. I don't know what COVID-19 did. Unfortunately, it never went to the trial. There were arguments here and there, money and that. It never went into the trial. It may have helped you, but me as a scientist, I have no proof, because you have not done a randomized whereby these are given COVID-19 and these are not given COVID-19. You follow them and you say, okay, statistically, those who have given COVID-19 have done better. That is the way. We have to mix our tradition with some science. That's why they are taking us to school, to work with herbalists, to educate them, to work with them, because indeed there's good medicine in the herbs. But we need to move further, including going further into pharmacological studies, to look at the active ingredients. That is where the future will be with our herbs. We do the herbs, we go further, do good studies, and also look for the active ingredients. So let's decolonize, but also bringing the science, the colonial science, to move forward. I think we need to find a way out to Kasabu Kanyama. So we need to work together, but we really encourage, in fact, even the colonialists. That's why they set up one again is the natural chemotherapeutics. All those departments used to be funded. Where herbs used to come, they do experiments, but when you go there, only that they have been saved recently because of COVID, it was all dilapidated. Left, yeah. The colonialists thought about this, they set up the national chemotherapeutic department. At one again, that was poorly funded. So one as one of the authors writes, COVID was different in Africa. We had thought it was going to be bad, the disease was going to be serious, it did not affect us as much, and it was not as serious. And as the book says, we don't have the answers. You say, is it the hot weather? It was bad during the summer in the north. Is it because we're a young age? But even the old people here, we're not as much affected. Then they say, oh, maybe Africans are more in the rural. No, especially those who don't come here. They are not in the cities. But Kampala, it was not. So the reasons why COVID was not, do they have pre-exposure, other viruses that give us immunity? We looked, we didn't get it. It's an area that we need to do better. But generally, COVID brought us and said we need to do more innovation. And as one of the authors says, innovation in Africa is still dependent a lot on the West, and we need to do better. The author talks about the very limited research in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa only accounted for only 2% of the research on COVID-19. There is also lack of intercontinental collaboration. So therefore we need new solutions as part of solving new situations. They talk about Africa CDC as a major step, which I agree, and there are a few things that we are bringing together to ensure that Africans contribute, we decolonize as we move forward to address future epidemics and pandemics. And as I conclude, I think the book we launched today reminds us how the enduring systems of power and knowledge that emerged after colonialism continue to shape societies, and this is the case on how we responded to COVID-19. Thank you very much.
I think he deserves a whereas from a speech point of view, the book is launched. We may need to have a critics part of it so that we have what to draw or what to capture on camera.
Okay.
So we have the dummy of the book somewhere in this room. It will be placed at a very central place. And true to the fact that we take note of the fact that you love pictures, we had to create a situation that gives you an opportunity to take a picture. So that then, when we are having a book about the launch of this book, then those who imagined the cover will have it easier and have you as part of it. So may I request that you step forward with the Vice Chancellor, and I think the editor will guide us on who next will come, but it's important that you, as our chief guest, do sign this dummy to symbolize the official launch of the book. As Professor Kaleebu makes his way to sign, as the symbolism of launching the book. Yes. Those of us who have questions or comments, better prepare. But considering that we have run our time machine, and that all the speakers were exceptionally eloquent, and in this new age of technology, we may have to have our questions sent very quickly, succinctly. So I will receive a question or comment from the audience on condition that the first one will come from a lady. Because to the best of my recollection, the program had several speakers and only one, if I recall correctly, was a lady. And that is Dr. Robin. There's always something very interesting about signatures. Sorry, I digress. I have yet to see the signature of the new central bank government, but I recall the one or the previous one. It's a very simple signature. You sign on all banknotes. Who contributed? The one of Suleiman Chifu. Always very simple signature. But then you find the signature of a poor man like Dr. Shimba. Very elaborate, it even has diagrams.
I think after this month,
so I hope that after this launch, we have to adjust and amend or edit your signature for that matter to fit into your new status. Okay? So we are progressing very well with our program. And I think Dr. Kaleebu makes very, very insightful discussion of the book. And considering that this book has not been uploaded online, there is no way one can accuse you of having used the AI to generate your discussion. It is very clear from how you presented your discussions that you read the book, and indeed took heed of some of the criticism that came your way as a scientist, but also you've had the opportunity to debunk some of the myths and misconceptions that could have possibly made their way into the book. Because I mean, the book is a discussion, it is not cast in stone as a body of law. Someone did mention of the laxity with which Tanzania held the idea of COVID-19. Perhaps that explains why they have a new president, not out of completing a term of office, but if you recall correctly, I think they lost the president in the course of COVID-19, and there's some conversation around attributing his death towards that. So by the time a country faced the art and press losing their fountain of honor to a pandemic, that may also say something about our own president and his appetite for death, and why he preserves himself as the most he can, whether with science, military might, and everything in between there. And it's also possibly a moment of personal reflection on each one of us, when we are faced with circumstances of such a nature, black swan events, as we saw with COVID-19, where we need to gravitate. We go the science way, we go the traditional way, we have a mix of both of them, or we leave it to whom it may concern, everyone on their own God for us. That said, please do not mistake my musings for a presentational speech. I am just filibustering around waiting for a question. On condition, it is from a lady. The first one must be a lady. If there's no lady, we close the session. And I see a lady at the back. Yeah. Yeah, she seems to be maybe a I was already up. Okay, I see there is a lady, but is her hand up?
Yes.
Oh, very well. Please, let's make our comment or question. We'll introduce ourselves and from where we come so that the person who has the main comments can address your question.
Thank you. My name is Oli. I'm a PhD student at Social Research and also a former student of the University. So my question is on the framing of the book title. Speak about decolonization pathways, decoloniality and African responses to COVID-19. I want to ask Dr. Shimba, how do you navigate debates on decolonization and coloniality? How do the authors in the book try to harmonize these debates? Because I know that the coloniality is called as a critique of decolonization. So in your work, in this book, how do you navigate?
It's nice that you asked your question looking at me, but it was for me. Because again, after hearing your question, I have neither understood it, neither would I lie to you.
I've taken notes. It will come out.
I hope she's saying that the book should have been on both skin, like the old titles we used to have, and not on paperback. But that's yes, at the back. Now we can take questions from the eager.
Yes, after the lady, I have now the right to take my question.
Yes.
Following the guidelines of our moderator. I'm Dennis Msimusi. I'm a lecturer at Uganda Matters University. My question would typically go to the editor, but it is emerging from the comments of our chief guest, Kaleebu, and from his scientific point of view, I would wish if he could also give me a comment. When science comes from the north and the guidelines, we call it coloniality. When our presidents respond with guns, we call it coloniality. When Magufuli says no, we don't have COVID and we are not doing anything, we call that decoloniality. I find it quite simplistic. Is coloniality only in adapting the north, or decoloniality in resisting, or there is also possibility of decoloniality in collaboration? For example, science comes from the north and it is useful for us. But we also have our models at UVRI that may not necessarily be in sync with that science. And there is that kind of collaboration for kind of a shared way forward. How does the book navigate the concept of coloniality, and where do we say this practice is coloniality and this is decoloniality? I thought it was quite curious in the issues that were coming out. Thank you.
I'll take the last question because I'm already feeling painful to whom the questions are answered. Maybe to avoid me feeling the way I'm feeling, please Shimba and Jamil, please invite me quite more often so that I'm exposed to this kind of thing. I hear even from asking questions. I fear when I'm in space where questions are being asked.
I think I'll look at you, but the question again is editorial.
Let me stand next to you. You can look at both of us.
My name is Argentino. I'm also a PhD fellow advisor. So, Dr. Simba, you convince us on the choice you have to navigate on pathways. I mean, the question of pathways, so the plurality of approaches to decolonization. I wanted you to speak on responses. I think even here you were confronted with a range of choices, initiatives. Why responses? Thank you.
And the last one comes in from Nateo.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you, colleagues, especially those who have played a lead role in the production of what we are discussing today, and the other dignitaries that have had to witness the launch. My question is to Professor Kaleebu, who has been part of the praxis in trying to shape how do we deal with the virus, connected to the theme of the decolonization. From your experience as Uganda Virus Research Institute, what do you look at the major constraint? Because as innovators, you came up with a virus, and you had even the political will. So what stopped you from launching this vaccine? Launching the vaccine. Yeah, as people who are trying to research the virus, you were trying to fight it, deal with it, but innovators came up with something, with some knowledge. Because from this lens of the academy, there has been a debate among the colonial thinkers, others who are saying, let's focus on the political. Others who are saying that actually it's an economic decolonization, we should focus on the economic. Others who are saying that we focus on the different spheres of human relations. So I would like to know from you, what stops a country like Uganda from having a vaccine? Connected to that, when one of your colleagues, Professor Guam, comes up with COVID-X, when you say we are going to subject this to rationalization, who comes up with that claim, which you call randomizing and know whether what is the effect, the efficiency of the drug, which personally I look at it as rationalizing the drug, is who comes up with this criteria, who has that infinite wisdom and perhaps accurate disinterestedness to say this is the criteria that everyone must subscribe to before your innovation becomes the standard to cure a particular ailment or disease. I would just like to know from your experience, because you've interacted with it from within and outside. Thank you.
That is Sulaiman. Many years ago, we were in the same trenches doing journalism. Then he became sophisticated. Now you are seeing a bit of him in the HD. Thank you very much for that great question, and good luck to you answering it. Finally, Dr. Spire.
Thank you. Mine maybe not exactly a question, comment, an observation related to that of Kaleebu. Listening to the language being used in the room, there is a bit of a dichotomy that I'm uncomfortable with. Traditional medicine and Western science. I don't think that is an innocent language. Why is the other one science and this traditional medicine? Because it already suggests the way it's going to be approached. It means that traditional medicine can only be accepted to the extent to which it can fit into the provisions of science. So how does one qualify to be science and another to be traditional medicine? Because as we discuss decolonization and all that, we clearly see that the standards we are setting for which ours can be accepted is that they have to fit within the norms of the gatekeeping of the West. I don't know what Professor Kaleebu thinks of that. Isn't there science in traditional medicine?
You have triggered our thoughts into that all too famous picture that, again, I will refer to my experience of journalism. We see very many pictures that almost go unnoticed, or dignitaries, or in church stairs, or in church pews. And no one makes churches like Kubaka Cathedral at the night. But I'm sure you all remember that old famous picture of a speaker of parliament coming out of a shrine. All out there seek matters of spiritual healing, but the picture of the magic from the shrine, maybe because of shrines are not made with law, so you can walk out standing, you have to bend, but somehow it spoke a different language, more like traditional religion and then the normal religion. Now, Dr. Shimba, gladly the moderator has no question. It may come from you after you answer this one.
let me take the honor of engaging with this rather easygoing one, and I leave the other questions to our discussant, which is a very interesting moment because as an editor, I can only speak for what's in the introduction of the book, but every single author is still responsible for what they wrote. And apart from really parroting or defending my authors and their contribution, I think there is something really this captures the introductory chapter, and which makes really me the editor of the book about coloniality as a critique. We start with Olive. Coloniality as a critique of decolonization. So, what's the argument then in this book, if I captured it very well? Yeah, two things. One is that, you know, we are in a formerly colonized space. That's not only colonize our ways of being and our ways of representing ourselves, but even our ways of thinking. So that is the coloniality that goes beyond colonization. That colonization as a moment in our socio-historical experience as being as gone. It was an episodic moment, colonization. But after colonization, then what was left is really now that the global structure of, if you like, the relics of colonization is us now, which we like to frame it as coloniality now. And you are very much right. Scholars of coloniality now have said that the decolonization movement is perhaps dealing with colonization, forgetting that it's coloniality that permeates and stays on as a leftover of colonization. And hence, that's the biggest animal in the room, really, we need to deal with. So the argument here is even more pushing further the fact that, yes, when coloniality is that relic that remains and hence decolonization fails to differentiate between the moment that we call colonization and the hangover of that colonization, which we call coloniality. The book says that even COVID-19, as it came, pulverizes even that idea of coloniality as a hangover of the colonization. Why? Because it went to the very core of the foundation of this epistemic base on which even colonization was based. So COVID made the global north yesterday's ambiguity of colonization astounded. They were all struck by COVID, and even, for lack of a better expression, they were stuck. And this is why this pandemic moment is very important to really think about, because I remember as we were calling for the chapters, I mean, you tune in on BBC and you hear this very important pathologist, government pathologist, who is informing the Prime Minister. And he said, well, I don't know. And then you tune in to CNN and you hear Anthony Fauci, I don't know. And then you go to CCTV and you hear this one in one, but I don't know. So it was a I don't know moment. And we have never been to that I don't know moment, which brought almost the entire cathedral of science in disarray. Because for the first time, I don't know became the most important sentence that hammered all these large mouths which we have always done from the time of the tete flies and all that. Was like, we will fix it. We know we will fix it. But COVID pushed everyone on the corner, and it liberated us who have always been at the receiving end of you don't know. That hey, you don't know is actually a shared experience. They too don't know. And so the coloniality and decolonization were suspended by the pandemic time. And so this book is actually a moment of reclaiming that suspension that is epistemically emancipatory because it brings us, all of us, in a room of possibilities of imagining that I have an I don't know, they have an I don't know. Can we work with our I don't knows to establish now a moment when we can discuss really the science? A global I don't know pushes the belief in science and elevate also the non-belief in tradition to a moment can we start collaborating and talking. So that's really for me. It will be a big shame, really. It will be a big shame if we forget that epistemic gift which COVID really gave us. The I don't know that was equally shared by yesterday's powerful and today's the weaker. And this for me is the biggest legacy. At the heart of our takeaways is really not whether vaccines came to liberate us from the lockdown or not, but it was this epistemic moment of uncertainty that opens more than it closes. Possibilities of a global, can we learn to know together? Can we learn to know together? And not just believing in one I know versus denigrating another I don't know. And I think this also answers the issue of the response. Now, because the S now, the issue is this response or responses now? I mean, of course, we were in the thick of that dark room where, I mean, for some it was groving over with their hands that, well, we do not have COVID because this is just one of the flu. We have had influenza, this is not big flu. And some responded to it that it is flu, deal with it by having a concoction. Others said that no, it is a very different flu altogether. Deal with it by having syringes. Others like it's a flu, but it is coming from underwaters. Deal with it by prayers and fasting. Others say it is a flu, but, well, deal with it by just see whether you can survive. Believe in yourself, eat in your time and sleep, build the immunity. So there were many responses. And this S should really help us to put a name on another thing which has never been pluralized for a long time. Is science. People have always spoken in it in the singular term. Science. What about if it's sciences? Can also have sciences within the medical tradition that has always singularized this word. That the science of the day says it, the science has it, the science believes this is scientific methodology. Can we have S on the scientific, on the science, on the pharmaceutical, so that the responses can allow plurality and variety? That was really the ink where we're ending at. But we read that it's red dry. We ran out of ink and we can sustain our S. A symbiosis, I think this is the question that has come to the discussant. Can we have a symbiosis between the symbiosis here, Dr. Msimbuzi, well, a symbiosis between this science and tradition? Can we have a symbiosis somewhere and then we transcend the very problematic binary of science versus tradition? That symbiosis presupposes that the binary, and that's the most problematic thing. I think calling for the symbiosis does not deliver us from the room of evil. The symbiosis presupposes that we have gotten a thesis and an antithesis, and hence we need a synthesis. I think we need to question the thesis itself and its antithesis. We are at the moment of not taking for granted what has been served to us as thesis. So we cannot even start thinking about the synthesis as the way forward because the premises of that synthesis are already they are at the scrutiny. In the epistemic dock is the thesis and antithesis which are being scrutinized. Thank you. Now my own amplified when you got that Fauci.
It's very good. This is good I came. This is a conversation I don't normally have, different audience. But I think what we should resist from, what this is for, is to think science is the north. And for us, tradition. No. That's not the case. That science, they bring science. No. Science is for all of us. Science is no knowledge. When you start knowing, even in Africa there was science. There's science in Africa. It's knowing. You get hypotheses, you get reasoning, and you try to solve it. That is science. So, from the tradition, you see something, these herbs are treating the cough. The tradition can do good science and say, move a little bit further. Can I prove, really, these herbs are doing very well? Yeah? When we talk about randomization, it's not in the north. It's not in the north versus the north. No. It's doing something that will lead you to an answer. So, in fact, science started in Africa, Egypt, the Middle East. Then it went in the north, I know that. Even in the north, they had traditional medicines. They were there. Even now, in the north, so don't think science is north. They're bringing the north. No, science is here. It's knowing, trying to understand. So now, if somebody asks me, there's COVID what? That's what I'm saying. If you put in science, you say, let me give, I have 20 people, I give 10, maybe X, and I give 10 COVID, I follow them. Don't start thinking that is the north way of thinking. No, it is a way of helping you to solve. So we should resist thinking, and that will keep us backward. The reason you are asking why don't we have vaccines in Africa, it's that because we have not invested in science. Let's invest in science to find solutions. We cannot lament science is for the north, for us we have our traditional, they are neglected. No, it will not take us somewhere. Let's use our tradition, make it scientific. It can remain tradition, but address it in a more thoughtful way to find solutions. Others will shall remain like this, others will go to the moon, they will go everywhere, we are there lamenting. So science is not for the north, it is for all of us. Yeah? It's not north versus south, no. Even when the white people put up the national chemotherapeutic center one day, was to recognize that medicine is in our hearts, but how do you put in science a bit? That's what Chinese also doing. Yeah, it's not just random like that. So I want to take it that way. Science is for all of us. It's not, but even this not colonial. Science is not colonialism. But decolonize and they put away science. No. So I like the book, but I have also a different way of looking at these things. Our children, we're taking them to school to learn science. Not to learn science in order to hate what is traditional, but to use that science now to move our tradition into a more thoughtful way so that we can find solutions. Are we together? Thank you.
Quite very interesting engagement, and I think I like the space in which I was. When Dr. Shilba invited me to come and be about the book launch, I frankly came due to lack of what else to do. As I'm going to sit here in the company of professors and we are speaking all these professors, but I must admit that I have been very much triggered, and this is my picture with the chairman here to say, when you have such events, which is always, please invite me, I will always come. I want to sound like this one of these days. So this is a man who previously everyone knows him to be wearing goggles and gloves and trying to check us in the microscopic space and everything. But when he comes here, he puts across a very good argument. And yes, those are the incredible stories that we're talking about. You are a surgeon, and just when someone meets you in your administrative role, you can't imagine you haven't so much as slaughtered the chicken. But not slaughtered him, prepared chicken. Prepared chickens. As is the tradition of Uganda Matters University, when you do a sterling job, you are rewarded. So I am reminded that at the end of this engagement, which is in about 5 minutes, all of us are going to be rewarded with a cup of tea and a snack as part of our networking conversations after we come out of this room that is keeping us in our seats and not allowing us to stay. So after here, we will walk out into the beautifully manicured lawns. It's okay from the rain if you're wearing heels, but that is also part of the Ugandanese that we talk about. So we decolonize ourselves from stepping on concrete paved compounds like you find at Oxford to muddy and soft ground. That's what keeps us together. But also even more, there are some of us who have distinguished ourselves even more for this event. And I want to invite with a lot of humility and the chairman step forward. You present the following with a token of appreciation from Uganda Members of Trust. The list has 3 people, and the truth is I am not one of them. Neither are all of you except 3, and the 3 are as follows. In no particular order, I wish to invite Dr. Kaleebu. You are the first recipient of appreciation from the Vice Chancellor.
I like pictures.
Then you will have enough, your face will even fail.
Thank you very much.
For being available, for showing true commitment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And a lot has been said about this young man for using his creative mind to create a captivating cover for the book, which, as they say in my word, you are addressed the way you are addressed. You may never remember what I have said, but at least you remember how I look like. So for this book, even those of you who will not read, and many of us are not going to read it, but you will never forget what it looks like on the cover. So Samora, Onyango, please step forward. The university is rewarding you for giving an identity to this incredible book. And then again, if you cannot read the entire book, at least the title on the cover, and then the forward inside the book. Then now the rest you can juggle depending on how much time you have with you. So Dr. Castella, who wrote the forward, is also rewarded, but I am told because he stepped out, my friend Kakaire will step forward and receive Dr. Castella. So they were trying to find a phonetically connected person to use Castella Kakaire.
My supervisor. But it's my PhD supervisor.
Yes, because we knew that.
Thank you very much. And so, let's be a bit democratic on this. Whether to be colonized or not be colonized, but usually events of this nature start with anthems and the other things we talked about, and close with the same. So I want to ask all of us, as part of decolonization, should we go through the same protocol? The sounding laws are please let's proceed. So as the rest of us go out to network, there is more request for pictures, so Dr. Pontiano, is the request for you to take a picture with this gentleman and others.
We used to look at samples together.
Wow.